Welcome to the Hennepin County Bar Association podcast. My name is Norman Pentelovitch. I'm the incoming president of the Hennepin County Bar Association. This is going to be the legal leaders version of the podcast. I'm here today with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. Mayor, welcome.
Thank you for having me. This feels like a deposition.
This room does feel a lot, and for those of you watching on YouTube, it feels like I'm going to depose you. And as a lawyer, and you're a lawyer, I think we could just do it that way if you'd like.
I'd be fine with that. Having taken depositions, you kind of oftentimes want to be on the other side because maybe it'll be fun. So yeah, if you could treat this like a deposition, I think that would make this a lot more entertaining, both for us and, well, I don't really care about anybody who's listening. This is mainly about us here, right?
That's right. And I want to have some fun with it too. So if you wouldn't mind just stating your name for the record and then identifying any concerns you have or anything that would prevent you from speaking truthfully today, that'd be great.
Sure. My name is Jacob Frey. I'm the mayor of Minneapolis. That's Jacobfrey.
And I'm going to stop you there so we don't have to go into anything that would prevent you from speaking truthfully. I know that you will, because here we are having a friendly conversation.
That's right.
So, Mayor, everyone knows the story of why you ended up in Minneapolis. You ran a marathon, you really liked it, you stuck around. I want to go back further. Yeah. You're a lawyer. Before you were Mayor Jacob Frey, you were a lawyer. Can you talk a little bit for the people who are interested, the lawyers and judges out there listening, what led you to become a lawyer?
So after college, I got a contract with a shoe company to run professionally and to try to make the Olympics. And this actually has a point to it. This is not just me being egotistical and bragging about my running career. So I moved out to...
But it's a little of that.
But it's a little of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what do you call, like a soft brag?
Humble brag.
A humble
brag.
brag.
Call it, yeah.
Yes, that's what they say. So went out to Michigan. There's an Olympic development program that was there. And I was running, I was eating, I was sleeping. And that was about it. And I started to get interested in different causes, some of them social justice related. And I was finding that the things I would want to do, the people who I would want to help, I really couldn't because I didn't understand the law. So I studied up for the LSAT. I moved back to the East Coast, ultimately enrolled in law school at Villanova. And I continued doing the running thing to pay for living expenses. And that running thing led me to the Twin Cities Marathon, which was the U.S. Championships that year, and thought it was a cool city, and ultimately got a job out here.
What were the causes that you sort of were paying attention to, that you started paying attention to as you were sort of growing your interest in the law?
This is before I even went to law school. I was particularly interested in helping people who were experiencing homelessness and or on the verge of it. I became really fascinated with this segregation of cities and how that segregation, both socioeconomic and racial, can lead to outcomes in life. I, as a runner, love this concept of a direct correlation between hard work and success. If I worked harder than the guy that was on the starting line next to me, I was probably going to beat him. That is a correlation that does not exist in all forms of life. So many things are dictated by who you are, who your parents are, what side of the tracks you grew up on, everything else, color of your skin. Yeah. And I wanted to see that correlation. Now, again, that doesn't mean you don't need to work hard. You need to work hard. You need to have skill or talent. But at the very least, you should be able to have that hard work exhibited in some form of success, which I kind of believe at the very base level is the American dream.
The analogy I think gets used a lot is, there's a difference between starting a race together on the starting line and somebody starting halfway down the track.
That's exactly the way you want to look at it, right? Yeah. We're starting together. You start together on the starting line. But again, so much of that race is dependent on the work that you did ahead of time, as it should be.
Yeah. And structural impediments. I mean, Minneapolis, Minnesota has redlining. We have a history here of creating impediments, structural impediments within the cities that you're talking about.
That's right.
Of keeping people from getting that, head start off the line.
Yeah, and Minneapolis is not unique in that dynamic where restrictive covenants that were on with the land and redlining, intentional segregation, highways separating communities from some of their most vital assets has an impact on a person's ability to succeed. That's like most cities, I would argue, throughout the country. Now, some cities, there is more of a segregation aspect than others due to culture and history and intentionality of what took place. And so I got into it. I got into that. And that was kind of one of the original passions, and this continues to be my passion here today. But then you go to law school and you get interested in all sorts of stuff. I was really into contracts for a while. I still am. I love this concept of two entities can agree to something. And there's consideration around that agreement. And there's a mutuality to those promises. And basically, if you don't do what you said you were going to do, you get in trouble. And I think there's kind of a beauty to that.
I think you'd find, and a lot of hopefully people listening, it's a common thing I've found that people go to contracts and they, what's your favorite class your first year of law school? It's not con law, it's contracts, because you realize that the whole world can open up to you when you understand what the legal process is, and that you can form that relationship with somebody with consideration, but then that has a legal effect, and you can fight about it later if you're going to be a litigator.
That's right.
So, okay, you moved to Minneapolis and then you're practicing law. What was your practice? What did you focus on when you came here and started?
Well, let me go back even before that,
Yeah.
because I ran the Twin Cities Marathon, thought it was a cool city, and then I was running down at the Pan American Games, which the U.S. Championships was a qualifier for, and I get talking to a girl who was also on Team USA on the bus, and I'm talking to her, and she says, my dad is a real estate attorney out in Minneapolis. I was like, oh, no kidding. Why don't you give me your dad's number? It was Charlie Farrell, who was a big-time real estate attorney working for Faegre. And I got him the number. I gave him a call. I got an interview, not because of my legal acumen, but I believe because Charlie wanted to have this Faegre triathlon team that competed at the Lifetime Fitness Triathlon, and he was a great cyclist himself. He was a great biker. They had this Navy SEAL swimmer, but they were down a running leg. They didn't have one. And so I am convinced that I got this interview, not because of any of my GPA, but because I was that final leg on the running team. And then I had a good interview on top of that, and that ultimately got me the summer associate position.
It's good to fulfill a need at a law firm, regardless of what that need is. It gets you in the door. You start doing the good work.
That's right.
So you practiced law in Minneapolis for a time, and then at some point, and how long was that? How long did you were at law firms for a couple years, right?
I was at Faegre for 2.5 years.
Yep.
Switched over to Hallinan. So I did business litigation at Faegre, breach of contract work, and a bunch of pro bono. And then at Hallinan, I did more plaintiffs-oriented employment and civil rights law.
Yeah. So then you're at Hallinan, you're practicing in that area, you're effectuating sort of the interests that you developed earlier on in sort of causes. At what point did you say, okay, and now public service, I want to use what I've learned so far, use my experience. What sort of led to that decision that took you from practicing law to stepping into public service?
It was a gradual realization. It wasn't like one sudden epiphany. When I worked at Faegre, I worked extensively on this pro bono ineffective assistance of counsel case involving the death penalty. Our client was on death row, BJ, and he was almost exactly my age, born in 1981, same grade level, a whole lot of commonality with one big exception, which was he was black, growing up in Dothan, Alabama. Dothan, Alabama is the death penalty capital of at least the United States, maybe the world. There were more people that were put to death at the time in Houston County, Alabama, which is a population of, I think, a few 100,000, than there were in the entire city of Houston, Texas, which is millions. And by the way, Texas was a relatively large death penalty state. And so there was all sorts of unfairness that was built into the equation as to how his trial was run, how he was treated, and even stuff that was really unrelated to the case, but just his upbringing, where he was from. He essentially got in with the wrong crowd. did some stupid stuff, but should not have gotten the death penalty for it. Did some awful stuff, but should not have gotten the death penalty for it. And I got very involved in this case, perhaps too involved. In a way, I was visiting him regularly, checking in both on his mental state in addition to the legal case. And you start to realize how unfair it all is. I still to this day feel really guilty about not continuing on with that case after I left.
Do you know what the outcome was after the
we lost the case? We lost we had a trial to argue in favor of a new trial.
Yep.
And we lost that. There's been a series of appeals and a series of stays, and I couldn't tell you at which point it is now, but it's basically a habeas petition. It's really tragic and sad. Here's this guy that I know would be a contributing member of society if he were set free. And by the way, he's been in there since senior year of high school, basically. And he's the same age as we are. It's a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of representation, I've represented pro bono people, folks who are in prison, people who are suffering those kind of circumstances. And that is it's an intense experience. You become close to those people. You become advocates for their lives.
Yes.
Really. I mean, you become enmeshed in the circumstances they're a part of.
Yeah.
And then it's wrenching when you step away from that. Right. But it sounds like, so you took that experience, representing one person, focusing intensely on their experience, the unfairness of a system, as you say, and then you took that and you turned it into a career in public service where instead of focusing intensely on the needs of one person trying to advocate for one, you really expanded it to, talk a little bit about that, how you took that kind of intense focus on one specific person, one injustice, and then turn that into a career that really is now dedicated to serving a much larger group of people.
Yeah. What happened is we had a group of friends. There was maybe 20 people. One of them is now my wife. And we worked on different causes together. We worked extensively on marriage equality, and that was an issue in 2011 and 2012 and 2013. We started a race called the Big Gay Race, which had thousands and thousands of people come out to it, raised a heap ton of money, and got a whole bunch of people organizing to defeat the constitutional amendment that would define marriages between a man and a woman. We did work on the north side, trying to organize to provide people with legal representation or just representation at all following a tornado that ripped through. Mm-hmm. And then there was a few affordable housing projects here and there that I was advocating for. And I gradually got passionate about public service. And so that group of friends largely became my campaign team when I ran for office for the first time in 2013 for city council. That's the basis of the story. And, people often ask, who was it that asked you to run? People are chanting your name or something and asking you to step up. And that doesn't happen. Maybe it happens with some people. It didn't happen with me. You gotta, there's gotta be a level of ego to it. You gotta believe that you're the one to do it. And two, you gotta believe you can win. And if those two things line up and you got an organizing team around you and there's an authenticity to what you're advocating for, it can work out.
Making some news here, Jacob Frey admits he has something of an ego. So,
without a doubt.
Happy to get that as the headline takeaway from this. I don't think you're
making any news on that one.
So you go city council and then fast forward, you run for mayor, you win. Now you are an executive. You're no longer the lawyer representing people, you're a client. You have a city attorney, you have people, providing legal advice to you. How is that shift for you, going from being the service provider, the lawyer, now you're a client, you're the recipient of legal services? How is that shift for you to being somebody who now needs to get legal advice so you can take actions?
Mm-hmm. The big shift comes not necessarily from lawyer to council member, but from council member to mayor.
Sure.
from lawyer to council member, you're still thinking in a legal framework. You're still voting on things. There are kind of defined areas. And as a lawyer and someone who, thought of myself as studied in government, it wasn't like a huge surprise when I became a council member. Being mayor and being an executive is something entirely different, because you're not just taking a yes or no vote. You're kind of defining the agenda and the general direction. And that's where, you need all sorts of legal advice. I am proud to be a lawyer, but I'm very well aware of lawyers that are way better than me. Norm, you're one of the best litigators I've ever met. You're a better writer than I am. The way you articulate a legal argument is far superior to that which I was ever able to do.
Too kind. Truly.
Yes. But I'm not too humble to say that there are aspects of being an executive, aspects of being a mayor that either I came in with or I was able to grow in and learn lessons to achieve. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of that, like thick skin. I got way thicker skin than when I did before. Some of that is having the courage to tell your own side what they don't want to hear. Some of that is almost a project of endurance.
Talk about that for a second. Can you think of something specifically, either a moment where you like realized, hey, I actually have thicker skin now, or a moment that like led you to need to develop it? A criticism. I can think of any number of things throughout your tenure where you've been criticized. there's no shortage of that.
No shortage.
Yeah. But I'm wondering if there's a moment or a particular criticism or just an experience where you said, okay, I hear you, or where you sort of noticed yourself saying, I hear you, but also I feel confident in my own judgment, and this is not going to bother me, where in the past maybe it would have. Is there anything you have like that?
There's so many moments.
Yeah.
First, I'll tell you, like, there's the moment that you're elected mayor, the moment you're sworn in, and then there's the moment that you actually become mayor and realize, oh man, this is on me. One of the first ones was there was this wall of forgotten natives back in 2018. This was when encampments started to be more of a prevalent thing.
Yeah.
There was a group of people in the room, different tribes, a number of service providers, American Indian, and everybody was kind of looking around like, all right, well, what's the plan? Who's running this? What's going on? And I was like looking around thinking the same thing until I realized, holy shit, it's me. I have to provide some direction here as to what we're doing. That was the moment when it kind of dawned on me. I'm not just waiting for a vote. I'm running the show here. And when you're running the show, I don't mean to say I'm dictating what happens. I mean that you have the job of kind of setting the agenda, and here's the direction we're going to go. Here's the coalition we're going to build, and here's how we're going to get there, recognizing that by then doing so, you're opening yourself to all sorts of brutality from one side or the other. And then you experience that over the years and you get thicker skin. The other obvious one is there was this big push to defund the police following the murder of George Floyd. A huge group came to my home, a couple thousand people, and demanded that I come outside, which I did because I wanted to show solidarity with the cause of police reform. And they called me up to the front and said, will you commit to defunding and literally getting rid of the police? And I said, no. And I was booed and shamed and spat on, and they threw food at me and stuff. And it did not tickle. I thought maybe in that moment my political career was over, but I slept just fine that night because I was certain I had done the right thing. I also drank a bunch in the bar that was nearby the home that had shut down on the front because they were worried about something bad happening, but I got in the back way. So maybe that helped as well.
Good to be the mayor sometimes if you need that extra drink.
You need drink.
I want people to understand too who may not be aware of this or who are listening. I mean, when Mayor Frey says that they were outside of his home, there was a crowd of thousands of people literally standing directly outside of the place that he lived with his family, demanding he come out. I mean, in almost like I wasn't there, but it was frightening to see the images afterwards, to know that was where you live.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's a frightening thing. So let me pause on that for a second and maybe take this a little different direction. But, Minnesota has seen political violence in a way that is I don't know if it's unique. Certainly in the last several years, we have seen political violence that it's just terrifying and it is visceral. I mean, we have had Melissa Hortman and her husband murdered. Senator John Hoffman shot. Yeah. We have Renee Good and Alex Preddy killed in the streets. We have had the Annunciation shooting. Yeah. And I want to come back to those topics, but I want to ask this. So you're a public official. You're a visible person. You're recognizable, and there is this culture, or there's this environment now in which threats against public officials are a common occurrence. Can you talk a little bit about how that's influenced, whether it's influenced the way in which you communicate, the way in which you go around, carry yourself, and also if you see any impact on the next generation of leaders, and if that's, there's a damper on that, if there's an impact that you believe is happening because of that environment, are we losing out on good leaders because of this?
Man. A bunch of questions in there.
Sorry. That was
incredible.
Compound question. We can object later.
No, that was incredible, though. You're right. So first, here are the areas where it doesn't influence me and it can't influence me. You can't back down from what you believe is right because somebody's bullying you. I have the tendency, if anything, to go the opposite direction if somebody's just coming at me yelling. I have the opposite reaction if somebody is threatening me or my family. What's influential to me? With intensity or not, coming at me and making a good argument as to why and why this issue matters to you and how it impacts your day-to-day life and how it impacts the communities that you love. And then listening to the reasoning that I have for maybe agreeing in part and then disagreeing in part. I have changed my positions before because I was wrong. That should be a sentiment that's embraced. And there are far too few people these days that are willing to listen to an argument, see the fallacies of their own, and then to change. So, no, I do not change my positions based on bullying, period. And if anybody knows me well, I will kind of go in the exact opposite direction if that's how you're coming at me. Not to mention, they want you to quit. They want you to succumb to a threat of a violent act. They want you to be scared about a message that they leave on your phone or a threat that they're coming to your house. And yeah, we get that from the far right a lot. Believe it or not, we get it from the far left too. And it's wrong no matter where it's coming from. So that I'm not impacted by. But yeah, here's how anybody would be impacted. When you're walking on the street, you kind of look around a little bit differently than I would have 10 years ago. I'm more cognizant of where my security detail is. There have been instances, sadly, when I've had to take my family and go stay in a hotel room because the threats were getting too great. That was the case during Operation Metro Surge. That was the case following January 6th. You shouldn't feel too bad for us. We stayed in a decent place, but it was scary. I mean, the jokes aside, it was scary.
Yeah, and you've got young kids.
We got
wife. You are a visible presence anywhere you go.
Yeah,
you're not easily anonymous.
Well, and mayors usually don't have a governor-style mansion with a fence around it and 24-hour security, and so of course we've got security measures. We've got cameras out the wazoo, but. It didn't used to be this way. And everybody out there should be condemning any form of political violence, no matter how it happens or whether you adore or abhor the person that you're talking about. I find repulsive and just disgusting what happened to Melissa Hortman. Just a giant of a speaker. I mean, I think politicians around the country should aspire to be what Melissa Hortman was. By the way, anybody that is sticking up for Luigi Mangione, I find that abhorrent. No, we do not kill people in this country that we disagree with. That's not what we do. We're better than that. This is America, and every single person, regardless of your political ideology, should care more about the endurance of our republic and the willingness of public leaders to serve than they should any particular political perspective. And you mentioned this. One of my biggest concerns is that good people won't have the courage to step up. Why? Because in these positions, unless you are to the furthest to the extreme, you're bound to get hit by them. And that means both political extremes. You know, if you're going to go hard right, you've got a whole crew of MAGA people that'll have your back no matter what. You go hard left, you'll have a whole crew of far leftists that will just have your back no matter how poor the policy position is. But if you're loving your city more than your ideology, you're going to expose yourself and perhaps your family to a whole lot of wrath. And I have this deep concern that when I'm done, and I'm done after this term, I hope the next great person steps up. I hope, and no, I just consider myself, no, I hope the next person, there's a great mayor, there is a great elected leader that steps up. They're out there. They exist all over the place. You know, I mean, I've seen just incredible people who have said, you know what? No thanks. Because that's not the life that they want to live.
Yeah. And I think that's something I worry about is just you want people to be you want people to want to be judges, right?
Yes.
I mean, especially in the community and in the bar association, something we talk about a lot, judges are being threatened now. During Metro Surge, I think we saw the bench and the bar stand up in a way that was courageous and front-footed and really took action. I want to talk about that in a minute. Mm-hmm. But you also saw judges being attacked by name, people who disagree with their rulings. And this is a national problem too. I mean, Chief Justice John Roberts has talked about this, but this is a problem. People think that legal rulings that are not the way they want them to be, I think a fear that there is among people who look at these things is that you won't get good public servants, including judges. And when people are afraid to step up and do these jobs to the best of their ability and put everything into it and say what they believe, they don't say what the law is and interpret it the way that they believe is correct, you're really going to see a crumbling, or it risks affecting the rule of law.
Yeah.
And so let me turn to rule of law now, because the Bar Association, the Hennepin County Bar Association, the other state bar associations, part of our mission is advancing the rule of law and protecting access to justice. Yes. And during Operation Metro Surge, we really got an opportunity to sort of put our money where our mouth was a little bit and take actions to advance the rule of law the way we thought about it. So I'm interested, you obviously were one of the most visible people, one of the most visible public figures related to Metro Surge. You were out there, you were swearing at people, you had a lot of, you had a big presence. I'm interested in your thoughts as a lawyer, as a leader, as an executive of the city. What is the rule of law to you? How do you think about it when somebody says to you, okay, we need to make sure that there's a rule of law? How do you think about that?
There are these common mutual promises that we make to one another. Sometimes they're statutorily based. Sometimes they're just agreements that we have in society about how we're going to treat each other, how you're going to love your neighbor, how you're going to stand up for them. And I'm proud that we live in a state where you've got judges that have the courage to adhere to the rule of law, to ignore the partisan pressures, to at times put themselves at risk to say, this is not okay. We've seen that over this last year. I'm proud that we've got tens of thousands of people that understand what those mutual promises are about how we neighbor as a verb, how we stand up for one another, tens of thousands of people peacefully protesting or dropping off food for those that are terrified to go outside or stand and watch over a daycare. That's standing up for the rule of law. That's standing up for justice. And, in addition to being a city full of activist-oriented, social justice-driven individuals, it's also I would argue, a city that would stand up for order and the rule of law. Because that's what we did. When you have the Constitution that is getting trampled, and I'm not just talking about the regular liberal constitutional amendments like the First Amendment, Fourth Amendment. I'm talking about the 10th Amendment. Minneapolis certainly has not traditionally been the city of don't tread on me. But we were getting tread on, and we were standing up for ourselves. I've never thought of myself as the mayor that was standing up for the Second Amendment. But in the case of Alex Preddy, a lawful gun owner who was killed for no good reason at all, we got to do that. And so, yeah, we are people that stand up for the rule of law. And, it's important that that rule of law has some form of solidification that is not based on might makes right. We've all heard Stephen Miller talk about how might makes right, how the strongest army, the strongest military determines what the correct answer is. Well, the judiciary doesn't have a military. They're right not because of might, they're right because of these mutual promises that we make to one another that we're going to listen to what a judge says when an order comes down. And one of the most terrifying questions that I ever got was during Operation Metro Surge when a reporter asked me, well, what happens if they don't follow the judge's order? And it was a question that I didn't even want to answer or entertain because it should not even be a thought that might not take place, because this is America. We abide by that rule of law, and we buy into these important institutions that hold our country and our republic together.
I think it's a really critical point that you make, which is this point about judges. We need to make, in a situation where there is the rule of law, where we believe the rule of law is alive and well. When a judge issues an order, you may grumble, you may not like it, but it's followed. And one of the impressive things, I think, and you pointed this out too, is our judiciary, especially the federal judges who are primarily dealing with habeas petitions. I mean, they put out order after order identifying situations where their orders weren't being followed.
Yes.
And there is a version of the world in which that is a constitutional crisis, quote unquote, right? Where you have the federal government according to the federal judges, not following their orders. And that could be a frightening situation. It is a frightening situation, but it could lead people to sort of lose hope or believe in a rule of law and sort of descend. But I think what was so impressive here, and you said this, is that that's not what happened. The judges kept issuing those orders. They kept identifying the flaws. Right. They kept pointing it out. They threatened contempt. And people responded to that. All over social media and everything, people were quoting from federal judges' opinions, which, these are not generally, especially federal district court judges, these are not usually the things that your average person is reading and throwing up on Facebook as a meme, right? But you have people doing that because I think with the Bar Association, we view the rule of law as it's apolitical.
That's right.
The rule of law is the thing that it's a shared reality we all have to accept and agree on, because it's there to protect you when you disagree with whoever's in power. And that you need it exactly in that moment. And it is convenient, if you are in agreement with those in power, to say, well, the rule of law is what I say it is, might makes right. But that's not when you need it. You need it when you are in the minority. And that's when it protects you. And I think what we saw during Metro Surge, I think we saw public officials like yourself. I think we saw federal judges, all kinds of officials, police, standing up and saying the rule of law means that we apply these rules regardless of what you believe. We make sure that the law is enforced. And we don't just say, well, this is too hard, and so we'll let the rules slide, at least on the state and the local side. And I just think that's a critical point. And it's something that, I think our police, so now I want to turn for a moment to our police, okay, the Minneapolis police force. After the murder of George Floyd, there was, you can call it a reckoning. There was a reckoning with the Minneapolis police force that had been a long time coming. And it was fraught and it was frightening. And that entire situation caused, I think, a lot of people to re-examine how they think about their relationship to authority and to the police. Yeah. Coming out of that, you had to go out and find somebody to come in, restore trust with the police, deal with the potential for consent decrees from the state and federal government. So can you talk about the qualities, and obviously Chief O'Hara was the police chief you hired. I think he's up now. You've re-nominated him. I don't believe a vote has happened yet. But can you talk a little bit about what you were looking for, the qualities you were looking for at that moment, and if all these experiences we've had, the Annunciation shooting, George Floyd, Operation Metro Surge, how has that influenced how you think about what a public safety leader should be, or what the qualities they should have?
I mean, being chief of police, especially in Minneapolis, in this particular place at this particular time and over the last however many years, is an incredibly difficult job. You are charged with, of course, keeping people safe, leading a department which has a divergence of opinions, just like any group of people would, shifting the culture in a department that was not known for compassionate and kind and fair and just conduct. That's putting it lightly. And so shifting that dynamic, yes, of course, was a heavy task, and I know that Chief O'Hara has led incredibly well through some of the most difficult times, and so being a public safety professional in this day and age is, like I said, it's no easy job, but you got to be able to manage a whole bunch of things at the same time. Measures for reform, measures for safety, an understanding of an urgency of a particular situation, and also being able to communicate well.
And I think we've seen Chief O'Hara, in my view, he does communicate. He communicates frequently with the public. You see him take criticism publicly. You see him respond to it when he has something to say. And I think he's leading. There are people who are critical of him. Some of our city council members are critical, and I think that's an important part of being a public official too, is being able to hear those criticisms and consider them. You mentioned sort of the steps the measures you can take for public safety. So one thing that's happening now, or just happened in Minnesota, is that our state legislature ended its session without passing any meaningful gun reform or gun control legislation. And obviously coming out of the Annunciation church shooting, coming out of all these other events, the murder of Melissa Hortman, shooting of Senator Hoffman, Alex Preddy, all these things have happened. So in Minnesota, for those, some folks may know this, some may not, there is a state law that home rule cities, which Minneapolis is one, are not, they are preempted from passing gun legislation. You can have rules that are sort of analogous to the state, but nothing more restrictive. Right. We've spoken about this in the past. Can you talk a little bit about how that limitation has affected the ability, or affected your how you would like to manage public safety, or you and the chief, or anything else? Talk a little bit about how that preemption impacts the ability to keep Minneapolis safe, and what sort of policies you would like to see if that preemption wasn't in place.
Yeah. The issue around gun reform is one of the most frustrating issues that I deal with as a public servant, because the vast majority of people in this state, in this country, support common sense gun reform. The vast majority of people recognize that we're not talking about your father's hunting rifle. We're talking about the ability to reel off 30 rounds before you need to reload. We're talking about guns that were designed to kill large numbers of people in a very short period of time. We're not talking about hunting deer, and if we were, you're a horrible hunter. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about guns that were designed to kill people. And no, I do not believe you should have weapons of war on the street in a city. I do not believe that you should have the ability to get a gun in a short period of time, buy another gun the next month and the month after that. I don't think you need more guns in this country than you have people, and that is the case right now. And I sure as hell don't think you should be able to get a gun, take that automatic weapon, that assault weapon to a church or a school and kill people.
Seems like an unobjectionable sentiment.
It is, and it's a pretty unobjectionable. And other countries, they experience things like this, and they say, yeah, you know what, that's enough. We're going to do something about it. We're going to stop that from happening again. The only difference is we haven't, and because we haven't, it happens in Minneapolis, and then it happens in another city, and then another city after that. And what have we done? Nothing. Like zero. And even when you have, I don't remember the exact percentage, it's something like 80% of the population, it's close to a majority of Republicans, I believe, that believe we should have gun reform. It doesn't happen. Why? It's a product of how our democracy functions. It's a product of how primaries work. It's the control and the power of groups like the NRA to control the outcome of these elections. And it is massively problematic because it's not representative of the people in this country and what they actually want to see, even those that strongly believe in the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms.
And you mentioned earlier that, you didn't expect to find yourself as a Second Amendment supporter necessarily,
right.
But in the situation with Alex Preddy, who was a gun owner, had a weapon on him at the time he was killed, I think many people found themselves thinking, well, if you're going to own a gun and lawfully can own a gun, then why is that a basis for anything to happen to you? Are you expecting to see, obviously we have an election season coming up here. We're expecting to see this issue probably going to be used by both sides. Is there anything that you see as a sort of area in which improvements can be made in city policy or regs or into the ordinance that doesn't conflict, doesn't run into the preemption, but would increase public safety around guns? Or I know the city has now developed the FAST team. It's the, can't remember. It's the,
I don't
can't remember the acronym now
myself.
either. It's a investigative unit that looks into non-fatal shootings.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the impetus for developing a unit that is dedicated to non-fatal shootings? Why is that a focus?
Mm-hmm. We're trying to prevent more shootings from taking place. And if you think about it, there's no difference in terms of the wrongdoing from someone who hit and killed somebody versus someone who tried to kill somebody but missed by a little bit, either by luck or by law enforcement or by some trauma care unit getting there in a very in an expedient way and saving their lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we should be going after both the people that successfully killed somebody and the people that almost successfully killed somebody. We should be enforcing the law against perpetrators of these violent crimes. And this is not just the case in Minneapolis, but in most cities, our ability to successfully find the guy that did it in a homicide is much greater than our ability to do it when you didn't kill somebody. And so we're devoting a greater resource and a bigger expertise through this FAST unit. Is that what we're calling it again?
I think so, yeah.
I think that's right.
Something assault shooting team.
Yeah,
I can't remember what the F was.
To again, make sure that we're focusing on the perpetrators here. And it's not just them. It's also understanding that sometimes these shootings are a result of retaliation, some form of gang violence, something that is group involved in some form. And we're better able to stop other shootings from taking place if we've got a good focus on them.
It's great.
Yeah.
So, all right, we've spent, and unfortunately, because Minneapolis has experienced so much over the last number of years of violence, we've talked a lot about that. I want to shift a little to another policy priority of yours, which you touched on earlier, which is housing. You and I have nerded out over rent control policy before, but in your State of the City speech recently, you announced that you're establishing goals or a policy that will impact the ability to undertake projects with the goal, I believe, of increasing housing generally, affordable housing more more specifically. Can you talk a little bit about what it was for those who didn't catch that speech or haven't seen the news? Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the policies you're working towards enacting, and then why you believe these are the right policies to do at this moment?
Yeah, we've done a really good job of increasing the amount of affordable housing in this city. We're producing like 6 times, it's between 5 and 8 times the amount of deeply affordable housing that we were before I took office. So I am proud of that. But here's where we failed. We have far too often concentrated that housing in areas that are already very low income. Those areas traditionally have been the north side and sort of south central East Phillips area. And by doing so, you concentrate poverty. By doing so, you don't give a kid that is growing up the ability to see different opportunities that he may or she may have in life. And we need to make it easier to build affordable housing in middle and upper income areas, easier to have a diversity of housing options and therefore a diversity of people in every neighborhood. So how do you do that? The first step is to allow for it. Now, we've done that better than virtually any city in the country. We have gotten rid of single-family exclusive zoning, allowing not just for a mansion to go up, but also for a duplex or a triplex that will not necessarily build affordable housing, but will make it more affordable. We've allowed for that middle area of 8 and 10 and 20 units to go up on these commercial corridors. And yes, we've allowed for additional density as well, which helps. But here's the thing. The next step in getting it done is quite simply spending more money. And why? Because it's more expensive to buy a parcel and to put affordable housing up in a middle or an upper income neighborhood than it is in a lower income one. And so you may not be building as many affordable units, and the bang for your buck, at least in terms of units, may be less. But the impact is greater. And I'll tell you why. I want the kid that is growing up to see, regardless of their income, to see, on their block, I could be a teacher. And you know a teacher. I could be an artist. I could be a lawyer. I could be a doctor. I could be a carpenter. All on that same block. Because when you see those different areas of potential for your own life, you can start to figure out both where your passions lie, but also where you're of the greatest benefit. I believe that everybody has an obligation to do whatever it is that they do best to benefit society the most. And sometimes that's painting with a brush, sometimes it's taking a deposition, sometimes it's teaching at the front of a classroom. We should allow kids to find and see those opportunities themselves. And you don't get those opportunities, you don't see those opportunities if all we've done is concentrate poverty all in one place.
So what policies are going to change? How are you effectuating that? What's going to change that will help advance that? I mean, obviously the 2040 plan, you've taken steps towards that over your prior administrations. What's going to happen now that's going to continue advancing that goal?
I'd like to see more of a focus on assisting projects that are built in middle and upper income areas, affordable projects. And again, as I said, that does oftentimes mean spending more money for a lesser number of units. It's still worth it. And that may be a controversial position, and I think there are decent arguments that are on the other side of this. Hey, we need more affordable units, period. Let's just go to the place where we can build the most affordable units.
Sure.
That is a fair argument. I don't agree, at least now that we've done that for years, but it is a fair argument. The other thing that we need to do is make it easier to build. We need to make sure that red tape is eliminated, that they've got pre-design approvals for things like those granny flats or accessory dwelling units. By setting that up, you can allow, again, for maybe not a deeply affordable place, but a more affordable place, allowing more people to have the right to live in our great city. These are just a couple of examples of areas where we want to do that. And I think downtown here, we got a great opportunity in that we still have a ton of people that want to live here. There are more people that live downtown than the entire city of Edina, than St. Louis Park. There's over 60,000 people that live downtown, and that number is just going up all the time. let's give more people the ability to do so by converting some of this vacant office space to residential.
And in terms of sort of so that bringing more people downtown, I know has been a core priority of yours. And look, our tax base is eroding in Minneapolis, right? Private homeowner property taxes are going up because we don't have commercial property, commercial entities paying property tax. Downtown revitalization, I think every mayor in every city ever has tried to do that. And you're talking about ways to do that, I think in part, converting unused office space to residential. Are there other things you're trying to do? I mean, it's a big message of the city of Minneapolis, like, let's come downtown, let's go to a Wolves game, let's do things. What, in addition to what we just talked about, are there other things you plan to focus on for the rest of your administration to try to revitalize, to make it attractive to come downtown, to be downtown, to stay downtown?
So many things. It all starts with people. We got to get people downtown. And I realize that's just the most simplistic thing to say, but whether that is to work, more people should be coming into the office on a daily basis to work. I would argue it's good for your job trajectory. It's good for your career. It's good for promotional opportunities. It's even good for things like patents. When you get more people that are congregating in a given area, more patents get put out. It's a statistic. And so I believe in actually coming to the office, and I'm going to continue to promote that. And yeah, I also realize that this world where virtual work or remote work is a thing now, that will occasionally happen. And so we need to convert some of this vacant office space over to residential. But it's not just that. We need to re-envision how entertainment functions downtown and how downtown looks. Somebody said to me the other day, they said, I just want the downtown that we had 20 years ago. And I thought, no, you don't. 20 years ago, downtown was like 7 blocks. That's it. It was the core where we are now of downtown. North Loop was a bunch of abandoned warehouses, didn't exist. The Mill District was an ocean of surface parking lots. Now downtown is dramatically larger, but I would acknowledge the core of downtown has suffered. The core. And so what are we going to do to transition the core? Well, we've got a few lessons we can learn from places like North Loop, which is what's not working anymore is these big, massive sports authorities and Barnes and Nobles and, massive conglomerate space. What is working is a whole bunch of these smaller joints all on one block. You allow a small local business to pay rent. You set it up so there's a dynamic on the street where you walk down it and you feel something. It's exciting. It's a place where you actually want to be. We can do that in the core of downtown by incentivizing these transitions from big-ass retail space to smaller retail space. We can incentivize it by creating a pedestrian way on Nicollet. We can set it up so that you can march down Nicollet, literally march down it, having a drink, having some dinner, buying some shoes or a jacket along the way, and ending up on maybe an arena where we're sitting right now.
And again, you're not breaking news that City Center is becoming an arena. Am I right?
I'm not breaking news that City Center is becoming an arena. It's, it's kind of funny here because this is just, but to be very clear, this is one of several options that would be spectacular, but I think the arena for the Timberwolves and Lynx should be downtown. I think it should be in the core.
No dispute from me on that.
Of downtown. It's I mean, one of the funniest things is, my wife, Sarah, recently took a new job and in this building. And I think 2 days after she took the job in this building, there's this news article that came out that said that I wanted to knock it down. That was not a shot at her nor at the exceptional firm that she works at.
Which we won't name just for purposes of not endorsing anything on the podcast.
Of course. But it's just funny timing. And again, this is just one of many, many options, many options that are out there.
Great. Well, Mayor Frey, we're almost at the end of our time here, but an issue that the whole legal profession is very concerned about is AI and the use of AI and replacing, work, lawyers. So the question I have for you about this is, when is AI going to replace mayors? Yeah.
Wow. I traditionally have been someone that tries to embrace technology, but to regulate around it. And I don't know that I'm the brightest person here to try to figure out exactly and predict exactly where all of this is going. Obviously, you have a wealth of information at your fingertips in a much shorter period of time. To the extent that somebody can make decisions or something can make decisions that are better decisions than the ones that I'm making, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I continue to believe that there is an element of humanity that needs to be built into any role, but if AI is able to help us use data to make a more informed decision that is not based on politics or the whim of an electorate, I think that's good.
And to build on that, and I'm being joking mostly,
yeah.
But one of the things that I think that I read about is that with AI in the legal profession, making some things take less time. Research, writing, it can be. What's going to really become and maybe return to being prominent is relationships. Yeah. You need to be able to you still need to find your clients. You still need to interact with your colleagues. And to the point about replacing mayors, from my perspective, when public officials are engaged with the public and effectively communicating, either if you're a judge through an order, if you're a police chief through a press conference, if you're a mayor through many different ways you communicate, it's the relationships that you can't replace. And it is what actually binds us as a city and makes us a profession as lawyers, and also makes us sort of a coherent population that has interests that need to be looked out for by somebody who has a relationship with that group.
And it's not just relationships. It's also the ability to think like a lawyer. I forget 90% of the stuff that I knew when I took the bar exam. But I remember every bit of thinking like a lawyer, and I use that all day long. In every single decision that I make, the process of problem solving, of trying to figure out how to make something work in the system that we have, I don't think you can replicate that through technology. You need a human being to do that problem solving themselves. And so that will forever be a marketable skill. That will forever be a skill that is in high demand. And so, I think we need more lawyers right now, not less. I think we need more people that have the courage to debate, to argue, to admit when they're wrong, and to, again, uphold the rule of law.
Couldn't have said it any better. Mayor Jacob Frey, thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.